With YouTube attacking alternative media, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon for just $1 per month. Link below. Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, the news of this particular movie has probably made MatPat completely cream his pants 5 or 6 times over, mostly at the thought of being able to absolutely positively capitalize off of the film version of it for his film theory channel, given how many times game theorists talked about this. But for the rest of us who are just, kind of casual fans of Five Nights at Freddy's, it seems interesting. But again, it's a video game movie, so how good could it be until you realize that it lands Christopher Columbus as the writer and director? That has me super freaking intrigued. Christopher Columbus coming in to write and direct this kind of movie. Like, what? Anyway, it says here, a film adaptation of the hit video game Five Nights at Freddy's has been in the work for a few years now. Originally, the project was set up at New Line Cinema with Monster House director Gil Keenan on board, but now a new director is being brought in as the project finds a new home, which is unfortunate because Monster House is an excellent movie. And I think given maybe the type of game that Five Nights is, and given the type of storytelling that was happening in Monster House, at least a lot of the aesthetics, for an animated film at least, obviously would be pretty cool. Now, Five Nights has, kind of a limited story overall, but it's a lot of the myth and the lore that I think a lot of fans have created, as well as the stories that the creator of the game has put out that really kind of keep people coming back for more. And that's one of the cool things about this particular franchise. I mean, it's weird to go to the grocery store and to see a Five Nights at Freddy's claw game, right? Like, that's how you know. Like, when a game that came out for what was it, like iOS or something, or just for like Apple, or I was on Steam too, but it's like just a little mini game that came out, and a couple years later you're going to the grocery store and there's a claw game for it, and like children are playing to get their hands at this horror game's toys. That shows you the power of Five Nights at Freddy's. And I find it to be weird that the movie hasn't materialized any faster, given the fact that it was originally announced to be coming out, or originally announced that it was going to be being made in around 2015. Now, it says the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is now situated at Blumhouse, which feels like a much better fit for the story of a security guard dealing with animatronic robots who come to life late at night in a place not unlike Chuck E. Cheese. And now Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone director Chris Columbus has been brought in to take the helm. And Blumhouse is a fantastic choice, right? Blumhouse is really, really, really solid in terms of being a good studio back this. Now, this is not new information that they're with Blumhouse, by the way. This information came out, I want to say, about a year ago. If I remember correctly, there was the kind of the announcement that it had moved over, but since then there had been nothing. Now, Deadline has news that Five Nights at Freddy's is moving to Blumhouse and bringing Chris Columbus as a writer, director, and producer of the video game adaptation. Here's the other thing too. Here's why Blumhouse is a good choice. Blumhouse, if the Oscars go well for Get Out, would make Blumhouse, if it wins Best Picture by chance, the studio that has now Best Picture of the Year, like a very low budget horror film, took Best Picture of the Year, and that would put Blumhouse straight up on the map. Now, the likelihood of that happening, I think, I don't think it's going to win Best Picture. It's possible Jordan Peele might win Best Director, but that doesn't matter. Jason Blum, who has been pushing $5 million horror features for the last couple years and turned it into a very, very, very good business, is on the verge of eclipsing what studios have tried for decades to do. Because he's a guy who puts faith in the people who make the movies for him. And they create these interesting concepts that fans like. So that is a good place for Five Nights at Freddy's to go. It is. It really is. Now, the property was highly sought after when New Line was sent the project into turnaround, but Blumhouse won out because video game creator Scott Cawthon liked the horror heavy production banner intended to do with the franchise. Chris Columbus last directed the sci-fi action comedy Pixels starring Adam Sandler, and that was a real waste of outstanding premise. Before that, he took a crack at kicking off the Percy Jackson and the Olympians franchise, which felt more like a weak copycat of the Harry Potter films. And the thing is like, look, yeah, Chris Columbus' last movie was Pixels, which was in fact 2015, and that movie was an interesting premise that ultimately ripped off Ghostbusters. I mean, there was a joke running around in 2016 that Pixels was a better Ghostbusters movie than Ghostbusters 2016, and I would agree wholeheartedly with that. But at the same time, Chris Columbus has always been known as basically kind of like a fantasy-esque director. Yes, he did the Percy Jackson and the Olympians movie, or no, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief was a 2010 film, which I thought was actually really solid, and it was a good adaptation of that book. I mean, it solidified Logan Lerner as you know, very much that type of character. And I felt that the movie, the sequel, Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters, was equally as good, but never really got to play, and had a lower budget a couple of years later. And then since then they've dropped the subject, or they've dropped it entirely. But I do feel that Harry Potter's success has a lot to do with how Chris Columbus handled the first two films. I don't remember why he left the franchise, but he definitely, you know, I think he was the person who was the best suited to ground it into the setting that the book wanted. Past that, you had Alphonse Cuarón with, you know, the Prisoner of Azkaban, which took a good book and turned it into more of like an art film, which I guess kind of worked, but really just butchered the story. Don't even get me started on Goblet of Fire. And then, oh Jesus, like the last half of Half-Blood Prince, like what the hell was that? And I'm more or less, I'm getting off track, but the idea here is that like Columbus grounded the first two, right? So I think he's good with trying to ground these in a sense of fantasy as well as reality, and not take it too far out there, which is, I think, a good idea for attempting to ground Five Nights at Freddy's into something that's not only going to be tangible, but relatable and scary to audiences who are going to be around the age of 13 rushing out to see this movie, which I'm not going to lie, I hope the hell is rated R. I do. I hope it's rated R, because I feel like it should be. Right? I mean, they might go PG-13, but I think that's ultimately going to be a mistake. Now, it says here that on the writing side, Columbus is no stranger, having written the original Gremlins. And so, okay, so he's written the original Gremlins, and he's going to come over to this. Now, the two are, of course, entirely separate from how they're done. But the idea there is the same. It's more of a it's more of a kind of suspense building world, right? Like Gremlins was directed by Joe Johnston, right? And you know, he did a great job, but again, the way that the script was set up is that we get to see this kind of horror play out in a way that that was very very scary at the time, and it has a lot to do with the way the writing and the direction happened. So if he's able to bring it in that regard and ground it and tell a good horror story, then I think we're going to be in good hands here. Plus, he needs a win. If I'm being honest, he needs a win. And I think coming back on board with this, probably it's going to be a bit on the lower budget side, very confined to obviously the Chuck E. Cheese type place or Freddy Fazbear's. I've never played the game. I have no idea. But looking at the setting of it, the idea behind it and everything else, we're going to see a lot of good stuff come from this. I mean, I'm personally excited, even though I'm not a giant fan. I just want to see a good video game adaptation, and I like the talent that's behind the camera.